Public speaking is one of the most common fears out there, above heights, above spiders, above snakes. And a lot of people know this, but the interesting thing is we're actually public speaking every single day. Public speaking isn't just standing on a stage with 1,000 people watching. It is any moment where you speak and someone else is listening. That can be one person, it can be 10 or 10,000. And yes, the fear most people talk about is the big stage, the spotlight, the eyes on you. But the skill itself doesn't change. Whether you are speaking to one person or 1,000, the fundamentals are still the same. How clear your message is, how you structure it, how you hold attention, how you connect. So public speaking isn't rare, it's constant, which is exactly why it is one of the most valuable skills you can develop. And if you want to feel more confident speaking, whether it's actually pitching an idea in a board meeting, or leading a meeting, or stepping onto a stage, you have to understand that the preparation is the same. So in this video, I'm about to give you a full checklist of everything you need to know before you step on stage. So these are the literal steps you have to take to prepare for the talk and what you're going to do right before you step on stage. This is everything you need to know. Everything that is incredibly important, at least. So these are the big steps that you're going to take in preparation. And I say that as someone who has stepped on stage over 50 times just this past year. Running trainings where I had to adjust every single talk to that specific audience. If they knew or didn't know, if they cared about it or didn't care about it, this is the exact checklist that I use every single time I speak. Whether it's to 5 people in a meeting or 1,000 in a room. So let's begin. So the first section of this whole thing, this whole checklist, is everything you have to do before you even start writing your talk. So the first thing is researching your audience. This is incredibly important and something that a lot of people miss out on. They start writing their entire script, writing out their idea, everything that they want to talk about, without any concern for what the audience actually wants to hear and what actually resonates with them. So researching your audience is key. We're not talking demographics here, we're talking context. What do they already know? What do they care about? What are they frustrated with? If you miss this, nothing else matters, because if your message doesn't actually connect to their world, it will not land. Which brings us on to the second one, which is actually understanding their actual needs. So you're going to write out one clear sentence or multiple sentences or questions. For example, they are there because they want this. They are there because they want to understand that. And if you can't answer this, you will walk past them. No one will actually understand why you're even there talking to them, because nothing you say resonates with them. Number 3 is map out their actual expectations. So they have a need, and their expectation now is, for example, what would make them walk away and say, that was worth my time. Your talk should reverse engineer that outcome, just like goal setting. We set up big goals, we break it into smaller steps, and those steps become your talk. So the actual outcome, the thing that makes this worth their time, is your goal. And you're going to reverse engineer and structure your talk from that. And number 4, adapt your content accordingly. This is incredibly important because you're still going to have basically the same message as, let's say, the talk you had last week. But now when you have a different audience, maybe these are executives and last week you talked to students, you're going to have to use different language depending on that audience. They think differently, they speak differently. An executive might not understand the Gen Z student slang, but a student may not understand the business jargon that you can use with an executive. So if your language doesn't match them, they will tune out because they literally cannot understand you. And now we move on to section 2, which is actually crafting the talk. So this whole checklist is built into 3 sections. Section 1 is before you write the talk. Section 2 is crafting the actual talk. And section 3 is preparing yourself for the talk. Now, I'm not going to move into a bunch of frameworks and structures that you are going to use. So this is not a checklist or a manual on how to build the actual structure of your talk. These are things you have to think about when you do. So first one is add stories. Stories are how people remember you. Not your slides, not your bullet points. Your stories are the actual bridge between your idea and their reality. Stories are how you make an idea actually vivid, relatable, resonate, and seem real. If you do not add any stories and just talk fact and fact and fact, no one will actually remember you and probably not even understand you. You have to put it into their perspective with a story so it actually becomes much more relatable, so they even understand what you're talking about. So a good story shows the idea in action. It makes it feel real. It helps them see themselves in it. For example, the actual value. And then building a very strong opening is probably one of the most important parts of a good presentation. Because if you do not have a strong opening, people will tune out. That first impression is so important. And if you don't have a good first impression, it will be such a difficult uphill battle from there on out. But if you nail that first impression, the whole rest of your talk is going to be it's going to be smooth sailing from there on out. So the worst opening is, "Hi, my name is Hugo Montell, and today I'm going to talk about this and this and that." That is the absolute worst thing, the absolute worst opening that you can say. They already know who you are, because the moderator, the person who said your name outright for the audience before you step on stage, they've already said your name, they've already said who you are and why you're there. They said what you're going to talk about. So you don't have to restate all of that when you step on stage. You don't need to prove your credibility. They assume you have good credibility because you're on that stage. So start with a question, start with a relatable moment, a short story or a clear point that hits immediately. That is what makes a strong opening. Things that break the pattern interrupts, things that are original, that gives the strong opening we want. For example, have you ever had your mind go blank right before you speak? That is something extremely relatable. And everybody has had that feeling before, and they will be like, "Oh, yes, I've felt that before." Instant connection. And now we move from one side of the whole presentation to the complete opposite of the presentation. So this is in the checklist, and I'm probably going to say that every single step of this whole checklist is very important, but they are. That's why they are in the checklist. So you're also going to have to prepare a very strong exit, a very strong closing of your presentation. Because what a lot of people will do when they've held a presentation is that they will end with, "Okay, so I guess that's it." I remember this from school. I know in school we're not as experienced and we don't really have that understanding of how to end strong maybe. But I remember this so vividly from school, where a lot of people will end their whole presentation. They had a very good presentation, but they end with, "Okay, so I guess that's it." And you see everybody around in the whole audience will be like, "Okay, should we clap now? Maybe." You have to end so clearly and so strongly that there is no question about it if you are going to clap or not as the audience. And there are two ways to do this. And what I usually like to do is combine them, really. So you either end with a very clear takeaway. So what I want you to remember from this whole presentation, it's this. Or you end with a very clear next step. So a CTA, a call to action. This is what you're going to do after this whole presentation. But the best thing is to combine them. You just put them together. So you have your clear takeaway. This is what I want you to remember. And this is what I want you to do to keep going forward. So for example, if I talk about improving your communication skills, I will have my clear takeaway on how to improve your communication skills, and then I will add how to keep improving when I am not on that stage anymore. And then something to always have in your presentation is very subtle, but very, very good for a talk. And it's something called call and response engagement. So this is how you turn your talk from a monologue into a dialogue without asking anyone to actually speak. So you're going to ask questions. They are going to answer in their own head. Then you're going to pause. So for example, you're going to be stating a fact, you're telling a story, and then you ask after that, "Have you ever felt that before? When was the last time that happened to you? Can you see where this applies to you?" And then you pause. And that is where engagement happens. Because now everybody is thinking in their own head, "Yes, that happened to me just last week. It was so annoying." But that is how you turn monologue into an actual dialogue. Now, there are different sets for different situations. Of course, when you're in a room with just 5 people, you can absolutely ask questions and expect out loud answers. But when you're on stage in front of 1,000 people, you don't want everybody there to say their own story or their own answer. So you're asking questions that they can actually answer in their own head. And that will usually be implied when there is a bigger audience. People will subconsciously understand that they are not meant to answer that out loud. So there are different sets for different situations, but it is important to understand that the call and response engagement is incredibly important to sprinkle in here and there to make your talk more vivid, more engaging. Now we're moving into section 3 of this whole thing, which is the actual preparation of a talk. So this whole checklist may seem very long, but I promise you this is very good, and some Some points may be easier to go through when you're actually preparing for a talk, and some points may be harder to go through. But it is important to have a checklist so you know you have everything prepared and everything is good, so you know exactly what you're doing when you step on stage. So preparation. Here you have to know your content inside out. You have to practice while visualizing the room. You have to know your intro cold. You have to arrive early, and you have to warm up. So first of all, know your content inside out. And I'm not talking about the actual words of your script. We're talking about the structure. We're talking about the emphasis. When will you pause? When will you breathe? Where are you going to stand? How are you going to use your gestures? That is how you actually practice your content inside and out. Which brings us on to the next one, which is actually practicing while visualizing the actual room. So do not rehearse in your head. As I said, don't just read every single word in your own head. That is not the only thing you have to know. You have to know the structure, the emphasis, and everything. So you're going to stand up, you're going to use your gestures, you're going to look around like there is an actual audience when you're just in your room practicing. You're going to wear what you're going to wear on stage. Your body learns faster than your actual thoughts. And when you can actually implement everything that you're going to do in your talk, it's going to make you feel so much better when you actually get on that stage and feel familiar with all of this. And then know your intro to the fullest. This is the most important thing to know. You're going to know everything. Everything is going to be practiced relentlessly, so it's not going to be a problem. But the intro is the most important thing to know, because the most nerves peak in the first 10 seconds when you step on stage. And that is when the most adrenaline hits, the most nerves hits. And if you can just get past those 10 seconds and build momentum off of that, everything else is going to feel so much easier. And of course, everybody can go blank and freeze in the middle of a talk, but the risk of that happening is much smaller than it actually happening before you even start speaking. Because what a lot of people feel is that they can't even remember their intro. They can't even remember how to start. And when you start winging that, you set up everything else for failure. It may not go bad for you, but you set yourself up for worse things to happen. So if you can get through your intro smoothly, momentum will carry you through the rest. Most of the time, at least. So now you have prepared the whole talk. You've practiced relentlessly. You know exactly what you're going to talk about and how you're going to do it. But there are more parts to the preparation than we think. And that is also when you get to the venue you're going to talk at. It could be just the meeting room or the actual theater with 1,000 people. It doesn't really matter. You have to know everything there. So what a lot of people will think that they can do is arrive 10 minutes early and just get on stage and start talking. But it doesn't work like that. There are two parts of when you get there and when you are going to get there. So first one is get there extremely early. We're talking an hour before, even longer if you can. If you have the actual possibility to walk on the stage, look at the lighting, test everything technical, test the mic so that everything is working, you should absolutely do that. Because when you've made sure that everything is working, you will feel so much more calm. You have now deleted a couple of the nervousness multipliers that I so often talk about. So when you get there early, you're going to walk the stage, you're going to look at where all of the spotlights are so you know where you're not going to look exactly. You're going to look at the layout of the audience. And they may not be there right now, but you're seeing all the chairs and how they are going to sit. You can test the mic and everything so that everything works perfectly. And you've now actually practiced very briefly on the actual stage that you're going to talk on. So that is very important. Get there early so you can walk through everything. So everything works like they're supposed to work. And then, second of all, very important, warm up. Because everything when you speak, your mouth, all of this around here, there are muscles. And your gestures, you're using muscles. So why should you think that you don't have to warm up? An athlete, before they sprint, have to warm up. So why do you think there's anything different for actually public speaking? I actually warm up before I record YouTube videos, just to relax my facial muscles and make it so much easier to actually articulate my thoughts. Because now my mouth isn't in the way of me talking. Sometimes I can stutter, of course it happens, I just did. But it doesn't really matter. I've practiced and I've warmed up. I would have stuttered so much more if I didn't warm up. So warming up is very important, and most importantly because there is so much excess adrenaline that you want to release before you step on stage to make you calm and feel more present in the actual moment. So always warm up your facial muscles, and there are multiple different exercises you can use to do this. And I can talk about that in different videos. I think I have before, and I can do it in the next video, for example. But you should also release some of that excess adrenaline. And you can do that very easily by just doing some form of exercise. Some push-ups, jumping jacks, or just go for a brisk walk. That's very easy. Get some of that adrenaline out, which will make you so much more calm and steady when you actually get onto that stage. So that is the whole checklist. And I know this was a lot, but it is important. There are so many steps to everything we do, especially things like this where we actually have to perform and we have so many people listening to us. We want to make it as good as possible. So why not use something like this that will help you so much in that preparation? When I started writing my first presentations, let's say in school, it was so common that you just had your blank piece of paper and like, okay, what am I going to talk about now? What am I going to do now? Of course, now you have ChatGPT that can help you out, but that will not be the same as you actually writing out. That will be so much more authentic, so much more real, and so much more relevant. So having a structure like this to help you prepare will be so worth it when you actually get to that stage. If you like this type of content, I highly recommend you hit subscribe because I post videos like this every single week, helping you communicate better, become a master public speaker, and most importantly, become much more confident. See you in the next video. Bye bye.